You may be seated. Thank you for coming this morning to Diana Keeler's oral. She's been my senior assistant this year and helped me out a lot in Great Books Half and also in Logic. I'm really excited about her message today, and I'm going to pray and we'll get started, and we'll listen to her give her speech and then have some conversation. Dear God, I thank you so much for Diana. I thank you for her message today. I pray that you will help her to just be able to express her thoughts clearly. I pray that the conversation will be glorifying to you and helpful to others. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Have you ever struggled with obsessing over food? You go throughout your day wishing you could have eaten that donut you were offered. The only thing you can think about is getting to your next meal. The greatest source of joy in your life is when you finally get to eat again, and this becomes the only way of life you know. Maybe you struggle with uncontrollable binging episodes, negative body image, or desiring to watch a lot of food-related content. Maybe you struggle with undereating, over-exercising, or even desires to vomit. These are symptoms of disordered eating and signs that one has an unhealthy relationship with food. These issues can slowly creep in, destroying one's mental and physical state. If you can relate to this, you are not alone. Disordered eating has become increasingly common. Statistics currently show that 40% of adults in America are obese, and worldwide obesity has tripled since 1975. It's estimated that 30 million Americans have struggled with an eating disorder at some point in their life, and clinically diagnosable eating disorders affect around 9% of the population worldwide. How can we solve this crisis? Healing from disordered eating can seem difficult and even impossible, and it's important to recognize that because everyone has different struggles, solutions have to be individualized. To begin, I'd like to start by sharing some of my relationship with food. My parents have always attempted to instill in me a healthy, holistic view of eating. I was never forced to eat anything on my plate as a child, yet I have also never been picky. When I was little, my mom used to lovingly call me her cow, as I would graze on food throughout the day. I would eat when I was hungry, I would stop when I was full, I was happy and healthy. Unfortunately, this pattern began to change the summer of my 7th grade year. I became increasingly self-conscious. I wanted to be thinner. I felt as if I needed to be thinner. At this age, I had a very limited knowledge of nutrition and how to fuel my body, but I became obsessed with the scale. I would see how many days I could go without eating, and I remember arranging plates of half-finished food in my room so that no one would notice. I had always been active, but that summer I joined a fitness training program with the sole intention of losing weight. I would never eat before training, and I only allowed myself a drastically diminished amount of calories throughout the day. I literally remember counting out blueberries. Unsurprisingly, I felt terrible and weak, and I have very few memories of that summer. I did lose weight, though. By the end, I had people coming up to me and telling me how good I looked. How were they to know how I had gotten there? As you can imagine, I was a growing, active young girl who was not getting nearly enough nutrients, and I began to think about food all the time. As I entered 8th grade, I experienced my first uncontrollable binging episodes. I would binge on entire tubs of ice cream and bags of chips in singular sittings. I would eat anything I could get my hands on, even out of boredom. This would continue for months until the guilt and shame would set in. I would go back to my restrictive habits until I physically couldn't take it anymore. This cycle continued over and over and over again so many times I cannot count. When quarantine hit my freshman year, all my physical coping skills were taken away, and I gained weight throughout this time. I hated how I felt. I was so insecure. As quarantine came to an end, I started restricting food again, and this binge restrict cycle continued. I started going to the gym and lifting weights with the sole purpose of looking better. When I got my car, I would buy food to binge on and even try and throw up when I was alone. I thought this was how my life would be. I felt helpless and hopeless. This was clearly taxing mentally and physically, but it also affected me spiritually. The main focus of our senior year psychology class at MCA has been how deeply connected our mind, spirit, soul, and body are. Thomas Aquinas concludes, "A human being is said to be from a soul and a body, is a third thing constituted from two things, neither of which he is. For a human is neither a soul nor a body. Thus, our spirit will be unable to flourish when our body is in this state of distress, as they are intrinsically connected. And as our physical state improves, our mental and spiritual will be able to grow." I believe it's important we have a basic understanding of nutrition. As many of you will know, our food is comprised of 3 macronutrient groups: fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. Fats and proteins are digested by our body more slowly, meaning they keep us fuller for longer, while carbohydrates are synthesized quickly, meaning they're our body's go-to source for energy. Each macronutrient is synthesized in different ways and serves different purposes, but all 3 can be broken down and used by our body for energy that can be measured in caloric units. This means calories are not bad. They are simply a measurement of how much fuel we are intaking. Excess amounts of each macronutrient can be synthesized by our body and stored as fat for later use. Therefore, an excess number of calories will lead to weight gain, and a deficit to weight loss with no exceptions. There are 2 main factors to consider when discussing individualized nutrient consumption: metabolism and hunger. Jeff Nippard is a fitness content creator who made an excellent video detailing these concepts. In this video entitled, "Is Obesity a Choice?" he explains that metabolism simply means the rate at which a person breaks down and uses nutrients. I find many people misunderstand what the concept of metabolism is, but it is based on 4 main aspects, the largest of which is our resting metabolic rate, which is based on one's size. It does not account for anything beyond basic organ functioning at rest. Another big factor is non-exercise activity thermogenesis, or NEAT. This is the amount of calories our body needs for subconscious activities throughout the day, such as fidgeting or walking. Other factors can include exercise and the thermic effect of food. Hunger cues are determined by our body's hormones ghrelin, which initiates appetite, and leptin, which tells us when we are full. In an ideal situation, these hormones will function in direct correlation to our body's caloric needs. But when an individual consumes drastically below their maintenance number of calories, the body will produce more ghrelin and less leptin in an effort to get us to eat. This is what leads to insatiable hunger over time. This is what causes those binge-restrict cycles and yo-yo diets that are ever prevalent in our society. Before we continue, it's important to note the difference between a faulty relationship with food through disordered eating and a full-on eating disorder. Disordered eating is a term used to describe a wide range of possibly harmful eating behaviors that may not warrant a diagnosis, while an eating disorder is a mental disorder with specific diagnostic criteria. There are mental components involved that can be genetic or circumstantial that can lead to this deterioration. It is necessary for all those who have an eating disorder to seek professional help, and if you are worried you may meet such criteria, please don't hesitate to reach out for support. So, how do we restore our hormones and natural hunger and fullness cues? How can we escape these binge-restrict cycles and yo-yo diets? I read Intuitive Eating, a revolutionary program that works, by dietitians Evelyn Treboul and Elise Reich. They pioneered this method in the 1990s, and there has been increasing research to back its claims of restoration and healing. I have had success utilizing this method. Now, when people hear the term intuitive eating, a lot think that it's eating whatever you want, whenever you want to, but this is far from the case. It is actually the process of becoming in tune with our body through instinct, emotion, and rational thought. This takes into account what the body is craving, what the brain wants, and what we need to consume nutritionally. Eventually, the body will be able to tell you exactly what it needs, and we will be able to listen. It's important to note this is not just another short-term diet. It's truly a lifestyle change that will not work without long-term commitment. For further research, I interviewed registered dietitian Denise Del Principe, who specializes in eating disorders. She confirmed my suspicions that intuitive eating likely works because of set point theory. Though set point theory is still somewhat disputed, it is something I have experienced and witnessed firsthand. It states that every person's body naturally desires to be at a specific weight. This weight is slightly different for every person and will change throughout one's lifetime, but when we are in tune with our body and our hormones, it will align us to this healthy weight without any sort of dieting necessary. Ms. Del Principe also outlined some of the ways she gets her clients started. Every client she treats is supposed to eat something every 3 to 4 waking hours in order to promote satiety. She stated her clients must try eating differing foods in different amounts at different times throughout the day until they find what works best for them throughout their daily life. How does one put this into practice? The book I read outlines 10 principles of intuitive eating, the most important of which is to make peace with food. If you have struggled with disordered eating, it may seem impossible that a day will come when you're not constantly thinking of food. But in order to do this, it is so important to have access to the foods you're craving. A good guideline I found is when I get a craving for food, wait 10 minutes, walk around, and if I still want it, then I'll have little. As restriction leads to binging, and restriction will lead to obsession over time. Food has no moral value. Eating a cookie or a chocolate bar will not make you a bad person. But it is clear that foods have differing nutritional values, and this is where the rational side of intuitive eating comes in. It is crucial to have nutrient-dense meals consisting of all the macronutrient groups throughout the day. This will ensure adequate feeling and promote satiety, stopping those cravings. What happens when you've gone through this process and hunger and satiety cues have been fulfilled? Ideally, one's weight will level out and satisfaction and normality can be reached, but unfortunately, this is not always the case. As I have also experienced, emotional and bored eating are prevalent as well. It may be necessary for some to seek therapy and counseling in order to fully heal their relationship with food. Other things that have helped me are not eating in front of my room or in front of screens, and really chewing my food and eating meals with family. Again, this will decrease eating out of boredom. Many people, including myself, are afraid this process will be ineffective, that they're too far gone and intuitive eating will only make it worse. But I would contend it's worth a try if done correctly. Others may say it is not healthy to have access to junk foods at all, but I would say it's important to honor all areas of our lives as humans. Eating a delicious meal with your family or having a dessert on occasion are important aspects of our lives. Health includes mental and spiritual, and overly restricting food groups is arguably more unhealthy than maintaining a balanced relationship with food. Where does this leave me? As previously stated, I started lifting weights my sophomore year of high school. And although I started for aesthetic reasons, I quickly fell in love with the strength aspect of that sport. Towards the middle of my junior year, I finally decided to go all in. This included learning to fuel my body, and I've spent over a year intentionally trying to gain mass. I have gained strength, and by focusing on what my body is capable of doing instead of what I look like has been an incredibly healing aspect. Now that I've been giving my body the nutrition it needs for an extended period of time, my relationship with food has largely been restored. Though I am far from perfect, healing is possible. Our relationship with food also correlates to how we view body image. You never know what someone may be struggling with, and commenting on somebody else's body, even if it's meant well, is never a good idea. At the end of the day, we are all fearfully and wonderfully made, and we are all on our own journey. Genesis 1:27 tells us, "So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them." Because of this, we all have intrinsic worth as human beings that is independent of physical features. This is one aspect of MCA's culture that I am deeply thankful for. Of course, I cannot speak for anyone else, but I have never experienced any negativity regarding my body, and I've never heard others talk in such a way. This is the exact culture we should strive to maintain. Disordered eating is extremely prevalent in our society. Healing one's relationship with food through intuitive eating may be the key to healing for many. A good relationship with food is important to mental, spiritual, and physical health. And now that my relationship with food is healing, I am able to focus more on loving God and others. Thank you.
Great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, tell us about what you're doing next year.
So I plan to attend Stephen F. Austin University to major in nursing and hopefully minor in dance.
So does your desire to go into nursing have anything to do with this journey that you've been on?
Honestly, no, it really doesn't. The process of picking that has been long, but I've always been interested in the medical field, for sure.
All right, so I've had lots of thoughts about where to start, but here's where I'm going to start. The first time you handed me your paper and I read it, there was a phrase that broke my heart. So you talk about how during your 7th grade summer, you worked on losing weight and in a very unhealthy way. And when you came back to school, you got lots of compliments. Mm-hmm. And normally I don't think that's something that would break a heart. But it did mine because it follows on this story of your struggle. So how do we, I mean, this seems impossible. I know it's not. But how do we change the way we compliment each other, the way we speak to each other, the focus that we have on each other? That we don't inadvertently cause somebody more damage?
So, for sure, this is something I'm absolutely still guilty of. And it's hard because obviously we want to compliment people. But maybe complimenting non-physical aspects, like something you love about their personality, or, hey, you're doing awesome today, keep going.
Yeah, it made me think about, like, if I ask you to describe God, what would be, like, the first thing you would say?
All loving.
Okay, but that's nothing about what he looks like.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's a great point.
It is a great point. Now, to be fair, we have no idea what he looks like.
That's it's a hard one.
What about if I ask you to describe yourself?
Ooh, I don't like this question. Do you want me to, actually answer?
Sure.
Oh, goody.
At least start.
Oh, goody. I like lifting things. I like dancing. Okay.
So I think also when we're asked to describe ourselves, we don't go, well, I'm 5'4" and this many pounds,
For sure.
My eyes are green and my hair used to be red. And
I know it's so hard because the physical is obviously the first thing we're interacting with and seeing, but,
Yeah, and so I just found it interesting that we wouldn't describe ourselves that way. We wouldn't describe God that way. We wouldn't describe Jesus that way, but that we still sometimes focus on that with other people.
Exactly.
And so again, I don't know exactly how we change that impulse to go there, but I think it's worth really thinking about and being conscious of what we say to each other. All right, so now I'm going to go back to where I was going to start originally. Why do you think this is so prevalent in our society?
I think food is just an incredibly central part of our culture and every culture. It's something we're always surrounded with. And honestly, the way food is in America, just the types of food, I think can foster that obsession, if that makes sense.
Okay. Does it seem to be more or less prevalent in certain populations?
I would assume probably less prevalent in maybe more family-oriented, meal-oriented, that, people just sit down for a meal with their family and that's how they get their nutrition and then they go about their day working. Okay. Maybe.
What about specific groups of people? Does it affect females more? Does it affect males? Does it affect the young, the old,
For sure. So I love this question. I would answer that it affects everyone. Personally, I've noticed a lot more men that struggle with it. I just know a lot more that do. And I feel like that's something that isn't talked about enough. Because a lot of people, when they think, eating disorders, it's, teenage girls. But I don't think that's necessarily true at all.
Yeah. So along with that, do you think there's anything our culture holds up as valuable that also feeds into this?
Oh, for sure. So I think like hustle culture, just going throughout your day, food is an afterthought. You just shove whatever you can, and you're not getting the nutrients you need. I think it's definitely a big part of this.
And I mean, we certainly live in a culture too that I think values the physical and the physical appearance. And
that as well.
Yeah, we see that everywhere. So is this a world thing? You talked about the obesity statistic, but do you think the unhealthy relationship with food is something that is mostly American, or is that worldwide?
I mean, I haven't done a lot of research on this. I would assume it's more American and more like first world countries, but
okay.
I mean, eating disorders and disordered eating affects everybody.
So if you have any health issue, I mean, this is a mental issue and an emotional issue, but also a health issue. If you have any kind of health issue that you struggle with, whether it's something maybe you brought on yourself or something you have no control over, is there a way that you can move beyond that to have a flourishing life in spite of it?
It depends on how you're defining flourishing life.
Okay.
But if you're defining it as loving God and loving others, absolutely you can.
Do you think it matters whether it's something that you have control over or not as to how flourishing that life can look?
I mean, I think if there's a way that you're able to fix those problems, then yes. If you can work on that and then work on restoring health, and then you're able to focus more time on others, like I concluded with.
Okay. All right, well, I'm going to pass it on for now, but I've got lots of other good questions for you too.
Right, this is a Pandora's box of all sorts of kinds of trains of thought we can go down, right? From body dysmorphia to fast food, and all sorts of things in between. So first of all, though, I wanted to applaud you for your bravery in talking about this, because I know it's a very sensitive subject. And I think there is a lot of healing in confession, not only for yourself, but also for the people in the audience who might think they're alone. Right, so excellent work.
Thank you. That's the goal.
I got to stop the waterworks. Okay, so I'm going to think about something funny.
Okay.
Certain foods are clearly more helpful than others, right? That's why Jeff Nippard loves his kiwi fruit.
Oh, yes.
Right.
Love the kiwis.
So how do we train our bodies? Can we train our bodies to sort of crave these things that are better for us, as opposed to craving the Snickers or the donuts or whatever?
Oh, absolutely. And that's where kind of the rational side of this way of eating comes in. As we're eating these foods that are meant to fuel our bodies will go to desire those more.
So do you think it's possible, because of your weightlifting journey, studying nutrition, right, recognizing how much protein you actually need to build muscle,
so much,
that the amount of protein you've consumed has actually helped you in sort of dealing with these cravings and dealing with these?
Absolutely. That's something that I had in my paper as well. Protein, in my opinion, is the most important thing. And if you're going to focus on anything nutrition-wise, I would say focus on your protein intake. That's what's going to help kind of keep you full and keep you feeling good.
As an avatar for Mr. Bowden, I think you would completely agree.
He would love this.
With a carnivore diet. Excellent. So, other questions sort of on this train of thought. Is there a qualitative difference between disordered eating and an eating disorder? Is it sort of like a matter of extreme or degree?
I absolutely think there's a qualitative difference. A line that I kind of had that I took out is that sometimes it starts as a way for a person to like kind of take control of an aspect of their life, and then the disordered eating ends up taking control of them, and it just spirals from there. But I think there's absolutely a bigger mental component that isn't present for every person within an eating disorder. So, for instance, I think I just had a lot of disordered eating habits, but the way my brain is wired, it never spiraled into that eating disorder.
So what, if you had to try to identify like the primary psychological root, or maybe just a few of the primary roots, what do you think is often at the foundation of an eating disorder?
That's interesting. I honestly am not sure I want to try and answer that question, just because I don't know. I've never experienced that. And I think it might be different for every person. So I don't want to say something that might be like offensive.
Are you good? So I'm gonna give you some options to take the pressure off you, because I actually had an eating disorder as well when I was younger. So I would have the exercise version where I would, I'd eat like a gallon of ice cream and then exercise for 4 hours.
Yeah, I've been there.
and it's a really bad place to be.
It really is. Yes.
How much do you think body dysmorphia plays a role in most eating disorders?
Yeah. For me, that's also something I absolutely struggled with. Like, I would take pictures and I just would look at them and hate myself. And then, I still have those pictures. I'll go back and look and I'm like, oh my goodness, what? Yeah. But I think seeing that and having that physical appearance is what's most important to you is really, at least for me, was the driving factor of continuing those disordered eating habits.
I think you bring up a good point as well of like, I don't know if it's a new problem, but I feel like today there's a sort of increased sensitivity.
Oh, absolutely.
Towards the way we look. Because Jesus says, is the body not more than clothes? So it's like they were clearly worried about the way they dressed, but it's like I'm not sure how many people were that fixated on it.
Exactly.
It's a very strange thing, but I think it's at the root of a lot of this. When you were talking about that, it's like, yeah, I feel like that's a big one.
For sure.
Another one, I think. What about the possibility of it being sort of like an emotional coping mechanism? Like, how common is that, do you think?
Binge eating disorder, I don't have the exact statistic, but that is by far the most prevalent form of eating disorder. And that often arises from like emotional issues, and people will go to food as their way to cope. So that is also something that I've struggled with. So definitely a factor.
So how can we use this information maybe as a platform or a tool for helping people avoid developing an eating disorder, knowing these are common factors?
I think instilling a healthy relationship with food and continuing that and making sure people know that this is important will probably help. And then also making sure those like spiritual and emotional needs are met so people don't have to turn to food.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Diana, great job. Like both of them have already said, there's a lot of different routes we can go. Mm-hmm. And I am like genuinely encouraged that you would speak on such I think now kind of what Mr. Acuff was getting into of like it's a more well-known topic. But I think I may even challenge, I don't know the statistic on this, but I would say it may even exist greater now than it did in the past. I'm not saying that it didn't exist. I think people were just less likely to discuss hard conversations in the past. And so, but with that being said, thank you for being bold and doing that. You mentioned your 7th grade self. If you could look Diana in the face of the 7th grade Diana, what would you say to her today?
I don't know exactly how I'd put this into words, but I would just kind of shake her and say, you're doing great. Focus on bettering your sport and not focusing on your physical appearance, and you're doing awesome. Like, don't make it worse. Because I was fine until I tried to fix myself, and that's when it spiraled. So,
yeah, and you mentioned I think that goes back to control and how you mentioned that in your paper. And why do you think we as mankind long for control?
Oh, there's the pride answer.
Yeah.
Just wanting to be, wanting to be in that place of almost God. Like, I am the one who is directing my life. and I'm the only necessary factor in that kind of.
Yeah, I think there's definitely the aspect of pride. I think we believe the false narrative that we can do it, that we may even be in control, because I think with eating disorders and disordered eating, you live in the mentality of, oh, well, I'm the one feeding myself,
Exactly.
and so I'm in control. And I think Mr. Acuff was also getting into this as well, and this plays into it as well, is the maybe the coping mechanism of, you can't control something else that may be going on, so here's something I can control.
Exactly.
Which, of course, as we are discussing, can become very harmful. You mentioned at the beginning, you mentioned in your speech and in your paper, you say you've listed off, I'm not going to list them all, but you list off a lot of different aspects of disordered eating and unhealthy relationships with food. Do you think that maybe for the person in the room, or anyone, maybe you also have maybe struggled with one of these for a season, do you think that determines, like, even if it wasn't like maybe a day, like you weren't very hungry that day, so you didn't eat a lot of food, does that determine someone has an unhealthy relationship with food? Or like, what is the continuous cycle of it that, like, oh, I should be aware that I have a not healthy relationship with food?
This is something I was actually talking about with Mr. Bowden. He read this and he was like, well, probably nobody by this definition has a healthy relationship with food, which I think is fair. But I think the problem arises when that is the thing you're thinking about, and that is the thing you're most focused on. Because I know that's what it was for me. That was the only thing I could ever think about.
Yeah.
And obviously that's not healthy.
Yeah, so in the spiritual realm of this, right, spiritual discipline is fasting. And so for a believer, that is like to withdraw from something. And often, seen most often is like believers fast from food, or like you think about Lent, like some people give up desserts or soda or whatever it may be they choose to do. Do you think that even I'm trying to think how I want to word this, even in the spiritual aspect of fasting, that it could ignite an unhealthy relationship with food?
So, just my personal opinion, I don't think fasting is a great idea, just especially depending on the group of people, just because it can lead to such harmful things. But that being said, it is absolutely the mindset behind it. So if somebody has the correct mindset and like willingness to improve their spiritual aspect through that, I think that's totally fine and that's great. But
yeah. Do you think that, which I think Mr. Acuff kind of pointed on this, but I want to dive a little deeper, or rather, I guess I'm going to word it this way. What do you think is the most like root cause to disordered eating or unhealthy eating habits? Do you think that's somebody's comment, or maybe comparison to like social media or media in general, of like you've seen, you know, like, I don't know, there's commercials. Back when I was a kid, it was always commercials you saw, but I don't know if now we have like Netflix and Hulu and all those things. So, but you still can compare to the, I think those things don't show reality. So then we can compare. What do you think out of, you know, those are just some ideas, but what do you think that the root is to most people's, like the average person's unhealthy relationship with food?
I definitely think it very much so depends on the person. Like, I listed a bunch of different unhealthy relationships, but I definitely, like you said, think that the most common is probably comparison, just wanting to change because of seeing that, and because of social media, that is just more prevalent now.
Yeah. So for the one who compares, what do you, like, do we just get rid of social media as a whole? Like, what do we, how do we stop that thought process in a healthy way, right? Like, do we live by the principle of, like, how the Bible tells us, like, if something causes you to sin, cut your arm off? Like, what is your perspective on that?
See, that is so difficult, because I think comparison can sometimes be a good thing. I think it can help us better ourselves in certain aspects. But again, when it's becoming that problem, then yes, maybe taking a step back from it. If you know you're that type of person to tear yourself down after seeing somebody else, maybe taking a step back.
Yeah, I think that is a great perspective, and I think too, just recognizing, and you've mentioned this a lot in the answers of your questions, of our thoughts and our thought patterns and how those really do affect our view of self, and how we respond to those. And so, yeah, great job, Diana.
Thank you.
Okay, earlier, I think there was some talk about meeting spiritual and emotional needs. So you can speak about this personally and then also just what you think. But what do you do first? If you're unhealthy, if you're struggling with your relationship with food, is that a spiritual issue? Is it an emotional issue? Is it... And what route do you go down first to fix those things?
See, like I said, they're all so connected. So I don't think we can say we have to pick one and start working on that. I think once we start this process, you work on all of those together, and continue that.
So if I fix my health, am I going to automatically be spiritually healthy?
Definitely not.
Am I going to be emotionally healthy?
Probably not.
So do you think maybe those are the more important things?
I think so. And again, I think it's just important to work on all of those together, because I think sometimes those mental and spiritual problems, at least from what I'm talking about, can arise from the physical issues. But, you know, if you need to work on the mental and spiritual first, then I do think those are the more important things.
And you talk about all this being very individualized, because maybe you go to food because of a spiritual issue or an emotional issue. And so in that case, it seems like you would need to fix those things first. It just like, it sounds all very complicated and overwhelming. So if there's somebody in the audience or somebody listening or somebody that watches later or hears about it, like, what would you tell them to do?
I think I'd love to talk to them about what their specific issues are. Could you elaborate a little bit more on the question?
Yeah, just what advice would you give to somebody who is thinking, oh, I don't have a healthy relationship with food. I'm also doing things that aren't good for me. So, like, what would your advice be?
So I think one of the biggest ones, like I said, is eating nutrient-dense meals throughout the day. I think that can fix a lot of problems. And just eating when your body needs to. Like, it doesn't have to be at a meal, obviously. And then the most important thing that has helped me is focusing on movement. And instead of, like, focusing on my physical appearance, I'll do movement and put my energy into that.
Yeah, I really liked how you said in your paper, you focus on what your body can do instead of what it looks like.
Exactly.
And what our bodies can do is pretty amazing, even sometimes when we're not so healthy, you know, if we would focus on that. So I want to keep pushing along that line because I think the spiritual component to it is so important. So in a similar vein, like I can't remember if you talked about it in your speech, but in your paper you talked a little bit about you had kind of put your identity in your appearance. And then when you started powerlifting, you put your identity in powerlifting.
Yes.
Which would be easy to do because she was really, really good. In case there's anybody in the audience that doesn't know, don't mess with her after this. And so, where should your identity have been all along?
Yes. So this is what I talked about at assembly. We had to do a little something we've learned this year for Assembly, and this is what I went and said. Of course, after my identity was in powerlifting and I finished that, my body right now is not doing well. It is broken. And when I lost that aspect, I felt really lost as well. So just seeing for sure, like, I have learned that my identity has to be in God, because everything else, like, it's not guaranteed.
Yeah, and so as much as we may try to have this good relationship with food, or as much as we may try to move and exercise our body, ultimately we're not in control.
Exactly.
I mean, do you know someone who's really healthy that's gotten sick?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sure.
And so that sounds so easy. Well, just quit putting your identity in what you look like and
really
put
hard.
it in Jesus. How do you do that?
That is definitely something I'm still working on. But just, again, I think it's about that mental state where your focus lies, where your time lies. And then hopefully it will move towards that.
Yeah, and I mean, you talk about it's where you put your time. Do you put your time into things that are eternal? Do you
Priorities.
put your time into, maybe reading or memorizing scripture that reminds me of who I am, and that it's not about what I look like, or it's really not even about what my body can do? So I think there's all kinds of things that, like, I think once you get I don't know that anybody gets their identity there and it stays there. If they do, then they're way better than me. But once you get that there, it feels like then maybe it's easier to take care of some of the rest, because you're not focused on things that don't last and aren't really important in the long run. I just want to give you another opportunity. So, like, you've talked a lot about how you've grown through this journey. Is there any other way you feel like you've matured or grown throughout this process?
Like,
just not even about food,
okay,
necessarily.
just like my personality.
Just you, yeah.
I think I've grown in my understanding of others. What we were talking about, this has been a common theme among all the theses.
No idea.
Thesis this year is just our understanding and willingness to meet others where they're at and hopefully help others along their journey. And of course, that's something with this I'm really hoping it's able to do.
Yeah, and you were willing to be pretty vulnerable to do it, so I appreciate that a lot. All right.
Absolutely. And I think even going back to, another common thing of this is like where you put your focus, right? Because what was your focus today? What did you want to accomplish?
I wanted to get my message across, and if there was anybody that needed to hear that there are other people who have experienced this, that they are not alone, and that healing is possible.
Right, so your focus was on the people in the audience, right? And that makes a big difference, and it's a good thing. I think a lot of these problems that we deal with, you look at the bodybuilders, right, they stare at themselves in the mirror for like 3 hours, right? Like, this is a problem.
That's another thing, like, being in that world has shown me so much about, especially, like, men, that they, I'm sorry, that they struggle with this so much as well. Anyways, not targeted at you.
You're good. No, I do. Right. I think I remember hearing a quote a couple months ago that I thought was really interesting. It was like the inventor of the mirror poisoned a man's heart. I was like, and what do you think about that?
Again, that's difficult because where your mindset is. But yes, I'd agree. That's where a lot of problems can arise from.
Because there's one thing, to make sure you've got, your hair's not doing this or whatever, right? Which I don't have to worry about, fortunately. But it's the fixation that seems to be a big problem. The self-focus. It's a common denominator, it seems like, in all these things. Because I also thought it was very interesting when you said, to pull the quote specifically, focusing on what my body is capable of doing rather than what it looks like has been one of the most healing aspects. I have found focusing on what my body is capable of doing instead of my appearance to be much more healthy and enjoyable. And I think you're shifting this focus from just something that really doesn't matter in appearances to functionality. But I would also encourage us, as a group maybe, and I want to get your thoughts on this as well. How do you think this idea in 1 Corinthians relates to the subject? What kind of perspective might this add? Because this is what came to my mind when I read your oral. Food is meant for the stomach, and the stomach for food, and God will destroy both. Do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit within you, whom you have from God? You are not your own, for you are bought with a price. So glorify God in your body. So how does that connect to all of this?
That is such a good passage. I think the idea that everything here is temporal, and obviously keeping our bodies in this state of health is important, but in the end, that's not the most important thing.
And I think the temporality aspect is very important to hold on to, right? That this is not the end, but also being stewards, right? Because we do belong to God. That your body is not your own, and so I think the perspective of stewardship. I mean, even the message you stewarded today, right? Of like you had this experience that you wanted to share, right? And so I think that goes a long way in sort of taking the focus off yourself, understanding the big picture. And there's another passage I want to share as well before I pass the mic. So we do not lose heart. Though our outer self is wasting away, our inner self is being renewed day by day. For this slight momentary affliction is preparing us for an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison, as we look not to things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. For the things that are seen are transient, but the things that are unseen are eternal. So what are ways, right? Because you have been given, gift of athleticism. What are ways you can steward your body that helps other people, right? That bears fruit for the kingdom, that serves the people you love around you.
So, I don't know if this is exactly what you mean, but I love helping others kind of find this journey and showing others that movement can be helpful to their mental health, and also just like maybe inspiring people through maybe the movement I'm doing.
What about like bigger picture, like long term, right? So imagine this playing out maybe 20 years from now. How do you keep this perspective?
Again, just focusing on the right things, I guess. Like
what right things?
Like Jesus, God. Like using these gifts to point toward God. Is that we're going?
I think so.
Okay.
I mean, these are
Perfect.
kind of like, these are tough questions. These are big perspectives. That it's kind of like what you said. Like it's hard. It's like you can maybe acknowledge it in the moment, but also it's like 5 minutes from now I might forget about it. So kind of the constant reminder. It is something. But I think it's worth noting that importance of focus. It changes a lot in how we approach these things. So, good job, Dana.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to jump into a topic of conversation that personally has had an effect on my life. And so you mentioned in your paper, eating a donut will never make you a bad person. Since when does food have a moral value?
So, it doesn't. Eating food is a tool. It's kind of like how money is described in the Bible. It can be used for good or for evil. And it's just, again, the mindset we have towards it. Are we using it for, like, what are we using it for?
So would you say that there's no bad food?
Yes, I would. So you have to define the terms. Context. There is food that is worse for your body, but food in itself is not bad.
Right. And why do you think that we as a society have come to a conclusion that we can just compare apples and cupcakes? Because that's what's in my mind right now. Okay. So like an apple, in where the way I was raised was an apple is good and a cupcake is bad. Given a choice, you should always choose the apple. Why do you think we've established that as a society? Why is there so much shame in regards to eating a cupcake when you have a choice of an apple too?
I think it's because everyone is so focused on this physical appearance and our bodies. Everyone has this mindset. It's very kind of drilled into people from a young age. but just seeing that, oh, maybe you're in an emotional state that just a cupcake is really going to help you through the day. And if that's the case, then, maybe the cupcake's better in that situation, and that's okay.
Yeah, I love how you state, like, we continue on this same route of it's all about our mindset. And something you mention in the end of your paper, which I thought was just like really intriguing. You say, at the very end, you finish, now that my relationship with food is healing, I'm able to focus more on loving others and God. I'm intrigued that you didn't say it was healed. Why did you choose to say healing?
Oh, I absolutely still struggle with things. Like, I haven't had a really bad binging episode, per se, in a long time. Thank goodness. But, I still struggle with overeating, like, not getting, so I still struggle. But my mindset has shifted, and that aspect is very much healing.
Yeah. I think, like, something I wrote down was, like, it's a process.
Yeah.
I think
it's a lifetime journey.
Yeah.
Like, food is present for life. So this is
yeah.
it's going to be there. So
Yeah.
it's going to be a lifetime journey.
Yeah, and I really think I would love to just, like, point out too of, like, for those that are listening or will listen or wherever they may hear you talk about this later in life, and you're like, oh, for my senior oral, this is what I did. I think it's important to point out that it is a process, that someone may not go to see a nutritionist or a counselor, therapy or whatever route, or maybe just the reality of, okay, I now have established, like, the first step to fixing a problem is admitting you have one. And so it's like, okay, I struggle with this. Like, just admitting that is not, of course, going to produce, like, okay, now tomorrow I'll have a healthy relationship with food. And I think that's something that's, like, worth noting of, I think we, in a lot of panels, it's been talked about, if we live in an instant gratification culture.
That's like the diet culture. That is such a harmful part of this. Like, like I said, the intuitive eating, it is not a diet. It's something you have to pursue, like, as your long-term goal for it to be effective.
Yeah, and I love how you mentioned intuitive eating. Denise came to my biology class and shared with my biology class about how noting when your body is, like, knowing what your body's communicating to you and what you need, rather than not just, like, overeating or what you, like, knowing that your body has needs and that God has gifted you to steward those needs well. And so, I think it's the reality that we do live in a world that has this diet culture of, like, instant fix, like, in 10 days, the commercials.
And that's where, that's where those, like, binge restrict can really come from.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Diana, you did a fantastic job, and I am just honored to have read and been on your panel. I think now it's time we turn it over to you for your questions.
Yes. So mine is maybe if you're willing to share some of your relationship with food, and if you have had any struggles, something that has helped you.
I can go first because I have a microphone in front of me. Yes, I have had an unhealthy relationship with food, and it has been like you said, I first realized it when I was 16 years old, and I became obsessed with portioning my food, and people around me were making comments of, oh, you look so skinny, you're doing so great, like, what are you doing? And I became obsessed with what people thought about me, again, going to what we talked about of, like, not finding my identity and who God created me to be. And what really it came down to was I went to college, and I realized that this idea of control, it's, like, crazy how much we've talked about of, like, my own story at the same time of, like, you sharing yours. I'm like, wow, this is the same things that I struggled with.
It's very common.
Yeah. And went to college, realized I had not control of what the cafeteria would provide me for food that day. And that like really broke me of I was trying to be God and control things that were not mine to control, which was really humbling. And so I started going to counseling, and that was a really big help for me, and seeing a counselor to walk through what does it look like to have a healthy relationship with food, and realizing how my unhealthy relationship with food didn't spur on my view of what food was or how I perceived it. It was all these other issues I was avoiding dealing with that I didn't want to deal with. And so I decided, okay, I can't control those things, so I'm going to control this. And so I would say just the step of taking to just seek help from someone who was wiser than me, who had studied nutrition, and was a really big thing that helped me and has helped me to this day of even when there's the lies of the enemy that seep in, when the topic of food is brought up, and just remembering the things that I learned in counseling and using those tools to better myself and continue to see myself as God created me to be. So
Thank you so much for sharing.
yeah, for sure.
Thanks. All right. So, lifelong struggle. And the only answer is Jesus. I had to decide a long time ago that I was going to be who He made me to be, struggles and all, that I had to decide to believe that He truly loved me. And I had to decide to truly love myself. And that's the only thing that's carried me this far through it. There's a song I heard this morning on the way to school, and I thought it put it better than... I think you talked about guilt and shame and it driving you to certain behaviors. And this is a song that carries me. With breath that brings the dead to life, with words that pierce the dark with light, only by the blood are we set free. With mercy strong to carry shame and nail it to a tree, you alone hold the power to redeem. And that's how I cope with it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is
Good.
This is a serious thing, right? Like it does affect a lot of people. Lifelong as well. I remember hearing stories that I scaled the refrigerator when I was 2 to get the Oreos that were hidden on top of the fridge, right? And the studies that show Oreos, light up your brain with as much dopamine as cocaine, basically, right? So it's been an addiction. But there was some tragedy that struck my family when I was not even 10. I used food to, feel better. I was about 200 pounds in the 6th grade, so I was a pretty big guy. Got very insecure because of it, right? Didn't heal my relationship with food, just kept working out. Mm-hmm. I was a skeleton. Logan, when he was 9, had bigger arms than I did when I was 18. Wow. Because I worked myself to the bone, literally. Then I started lifting weights. My relationship with food didn't get better. I just used it as an excuse to eat more. Right? So it's I'm trying to get big, right? Then I got the hernia, had to stop lifting weights, continued to get bigger over these last few years, right? And so recently, I think some things that have helped me a lot is realizing I was placing way too much value on the way my body looked. There's a tendency in our culture, I think, where this sort of latent existentialism comes in of we almost try to create our identity around the way we look,
Absolutely.
around the way we present ourselves, yes. Right? And so kind of disconnecting the fact that my identity is not made by those things has been very helpful, right? That my identity comes from Christ. This body will pass away, right? The mortal will put on the immortal, the perishable will put on the imperishable. I don't belong to myself, right? That I'm called to be a steward. I'm focusing on other people, and also understanding. I think you pointed out, right? It's finding different ways of coping with stress has been extremely valuable, and coping mechanisms that aren't eating food or basically destroying myself. Right? It's a form of self-harm.
Yes.
Right? And so those have been sort of like always in the background, like my whole life. It's been very frustrating, but has been better recently, for which I'm very grateful. I think the grace of God abounds in these things, and I hope the same for you, that you continue this upward trajectory that I think you're on. So you seem to clearly be on,
Yes,
based on the things
I'm
you've...
thankful that I was able to find this so early in my life because, I know people who are older and still are struggling with this, and I'm like, please come to my thesis. And
I wonder how many people just haven't admitted they deal with this, or maybe don't recognize it. Right? Like, this might be even more prevalent than the numbers say. So I'm really glad you talked about this. Excellent work. I'm going to pray for us, and then you'll be good. So, dear God, we just thank you for this time to come together to discuss these kinds of subjects. God, we thank you for the healing that you bring. We thank you that our identity is found in you. We thank you for Diana, what you've shared with her. God, the wisdom you've given her, the time and opportunity to reflect, that you've just given her this opportunity to speak to the audience, God, to open up this conversation, to just love her friends, love her family, love the people here well. We thank you for your love for us and all that you do. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.